Well, hi everybody. You are listening to a career advice webinar by the Royal Australian Chemical Institute, the professional association to chemists in Australia. I'm Dave Samet, coordinator of the RACI mentoring program. Tonight, our panel of experts will be discussing techniques and tips on how to ace your interview in order to get the job that you want. We'll be speaking from our past experience as both interviewer and interviewee and providing insight on what recruiters are looking for when seeking out the best candidate. There is a large variety of interview formats, from postgraduate skills-based panel, one-on-one, and now increasingly popular video conference style interviews. In this enormously competitive process, how can you best prepare yourselves? We want to offer our advice and guidance to help you improve your interview skills and increase your chance of being hired. But before we start tonight's panel session, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting all around Australia. We recognise the elders past, present and emerging, and also recognise their contributions as Australia's first scientists and engineers, building a healthy and safe community, what they've done and what we can still learn from their ways. As a quick housekeeping note, for those of you, most of you would be familiar with Zoom by now, but there is a Q&A panel where you can add any of your questions, and please use the Q&A rather than the chat function, because then other people can vote up your questions and we can see what's most important to you. We do have a list of prepared questions, but typically we abandon them pretty early as people start to ask questions from the floor, so we strongly encourage you to do so. We would also like to thank the sponsors to RACI's Careers Development Program, Envirolab, Laboratory Credit Union and DCS Technical. So I'm joined tonight by three excellent panellists. Vanessa Robertson, Director at DFAT in the Chemical Weapons and Compliance area. Patricia Rushton, Senior HR Advisor at Australian Laboratory Services Global, ALS Global, and Keely Munro, who is a Principal Consultant at Kelly Services, which is now becoming programmed. Welcome everybody and thank you for your participation. Why don't we start with a very quick round robin, just a quick 2-minute introduction from everybody. Keely, would you like to start since you're at the top of my pile?
Sure. Yes, thank you very much for the warm introduction. So as Dave mentioned, I am a principal consultant at Kelly Scientific Resources. And yes, we have just joined with Programmed, which is another recruitment agency, one of the 10th largest employers in Australia. I come from a chemistry background, so I use my scientific background and knowledge to help any individuals in the scientific sector get into the workplace. I'm also a member of the RACI WA branch, so I'm excited to be here tonight and to help you with some of those interview tips and tricks along the way. Thank you.
Excellent. Patricia.
Yep, so my name's Patricia. I am a Senior HR Advisor for Australian Laboratory Services in WA. We're a global company. We've got about 13,000 employees globally. Don't look after them all, fortunately, but I do look after WA South Australia. We are analytical testing and inspection services for a variety of industries. WA is mainly mining industries, so we're pretty busy at the moment, which is good for the company and good for the country. I look after about 600 plus staff, 7 sites and 4 business divisions, which keep me extremely busy. Great job. Great company to work for, which is why I'm still here after 12 years. It was 12 years yesterday, which is nice anniversary. Yep, so enjoy my job, enjoy the people side of it, and enjoy this kind of thing as well, because this is good to pass knowledge on and help people ace those interviews and get the next job.
And Vanessa.
Good evening, everybody. So I'm Vanessa Robertson. I head up the Chemical Weapons Convention Implementation section in DFAT. And I'm very happy to talk to any chemists about the Chemical Weapons Convention implementation and make sure that you're compliant with the legislation and the convention. Today I'm here to share some of my experience being on a panel and also being interviewed by a panel. I would like to stress that these are my own views and they don't reflect the views of DFAT or of the government. So these are just completely my own experience that I'm sharing with you today.
Now, Vanessa, you have the distinguish of being one of the coolest jobs in Australia. So,
I do really enjoy my job, and I'm very happy to talk to anybody about what the job actually entails. But it really is about helping industry do what it needs to do and be compliant with the conventions. It's there for a particular reason, but it's not there to stop industry from doing what it needs to do.
So one of the reasons I've selected each of you is because you each bring a very different perspective, when I pronounce it correctly, to the table here. Vanessa, government recruitment is, in my understanding, very regimented. It follows a very strict pattern. It needs to, because the government not only needs to be fair, but it needs to be seen to be fair. So government applications tend to follow a very strict format, a very strict application form, and to involve a panel, hopefully a diverse panel, to try to achieve all of the fairness that we would hope to achieve. I am in no way running down the role of the recruitment consultant, Keely. You know that I used to be a recruitment consultant, but recruitment consultant almost sits at the opposite end of that, because it's very much about your opinion. You become the decision maker. There's no panel. It's you and ultimately who you think is going to be a best fit for your client, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then Patricia, you sit as sort of halfway ground, because being HR in a company, your job is it's effectively threefold. It is to find and select the best candidates to the company. It's also to act as a gatekeeper to keep the candidates away from the productive members of your company until you're ready to introduce them. And lastly, it's also to look after the interests of your company and its employees internally. Have I got a decent summary there?
Absolutely, yes.
Excellent. Okay. Starting with, I guess, the preparation part. I read an interesting article the other day, actually. What do you do what should a candidate do when they have applied for a position and they haven't heard anything back yet? It's been a week and they haven't heard back from the potential employer. Patricia, you spoke last, so why don't you jump in? How do you like people to handle that situation with you?
Oh, to be honest, it all depends on how busy I am at the time. So if somebody's, if I've got, 150 people applying for a job, the hardest thing is actually getting to them and getting through those resumes. Somebody sending me an email saying, hey, I haven't heard a reply yet. I may reply and just say, we're in the process. A phone call as well. If somebody phones up and says, hey, can you tell me a bit more about the job, or, where I am in the selection process. It just really depends on the busyness of my day. Sometimes it's a good ploy, because if I speak to somebody, I'm impressed with them, then it might get written at the top of my list. So if and but, so yeah, dependent on, literally my workload at the time.
Yeah. And so is there a good way that they can gently sound you out about that? Is it as simple as saying, do you have, if they're calling you, do you have a moment to chat, or is there a better way of handling that?
Yeah, I suppose that would be good. Yeah. I mean, sometimes they won't get through to me, they'll get through to reception. And if I'm busy, then it will be a case of, too busy. Then maybe an email will be more effective, and I've got a bit more time to have a look at that.
Fair play. Keely, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I would mirror everything that Pat just said there. The thing that I would encourage, if you are going to follow up your application, is to have more than just a question about what the status of your application is, something relevant, something that's going to set you out from the crowd, just another follow-up, because the number of times that somebody calls, they don't even introduce who they are, but, saying, how is my application going? It's not really sending the right messages. So I think just having something prepared to ask that might be outside of the scope of what was in the job advertisement, just so that, there's more than just the reason to call to follow up the application.
Okay. So a good question then, as an example, I mean, could a candidate, I always like people saying, firstly, I'm just confirming that you have received my application. But then I love a follow-up. I love a positive, me, right? You've dealt with me long enough that you know how positive I like to be. So I like to say something like, I'm excited about this position. Is there something that I can do to distinguish myself from the crowd? Or something like, is there something extra I can tell you about myself that wasn't in my application? Are two questions that I quite like. But do you have other suggestions?
Yeah, I think offering a little bit extra as well, just going, continuing along. I'm just thinking out loud right now, but, offering, I don't ask for cover letters in most of my application process, but, offering, to send me a letter or something, it just really gives that extra intent that you're very interested in the opportunity, and just kind of keep the dialogue going if you can. I mean, but at the same time, respecting that the person on the other end of the phone, they might be in the middle of something. So just asking them about their availability to have a chat just then.
Interesting. Now, Patricia, that raises an interesting point. Sorry, Vanessa, this is a little bit less relevant to you because you won't see a lot of this process until we get to the panel. We'll talk about the panel in a moment, but I'm not ignoring you. But Patricia, a company like ALS, I would imagine that in the early career scientists that you employ, it's quite a plug and play scenario. You're finding people who have the skills, who can do a particular job that you can take them and put them straight into that job. And therefore the resume would probably be more important than a cover letter for your style of work. But am I correct?
Yeah, yes, to a certain extent, yeah. So if we're looking for instrumentation skills, experience in instrumentation, then definitely what's in the resume, a degree, what sort of degree you've got. That sort of thing is really important for more high level jobs. So, chemist.
So what is then, sorry, I interrupted, but what is then your attitude to cover letters generally?
Now, I like cover letters because I might read a resume and say, why does this person want to come and work with us? They might be changing fields. They might have done work or chemical engineering, for example, and I say, well, why are you applying at ALS? So that cover letter gives me a bit more of an idea of what's motivating them to move. It gives me an idea of the personality as well, because obviously a resume is quite, it's facts and figures. Short ones now are really, really just facts and figures, the one-page ones, which I really do like. But that cover letter does give you, oh yeah, I love them. All in one page, not too much. No, I know everything within a glance. But the cover letter then will tell me about that personality. And that's where people can shine and they can actually stand out. And sometimes when I've gone through a resume and thought, maybe not, looked at the cover letter and gone, oh yeah, I really like this person, because of the personalities come through, their drive, their ambition. And it's somebody that I say, well, yeah, I think they'll be a good fit with this company.
Okay.
Really important.
That's excellent. So they've got through the initial application process and you've called them to an interview. What should a good candidate be doing to prepare?
Look at what we do, and don't just sort of go in and 5 minutes before, the night before, finish Netflix, get on the website and have a two or 3 minute look. No, I want more than that. I want somebody who's actually interested enough in what we do and what we're about and what we stand for to be able to give me a good sounding of what we are as a business. So just coming in and saying, I looked at the website last night and ALS is really big. Well, yeah, it is, but what else? Is it really going to fit your ambitions? Does it fit your values? Is it the job you want? It's science, but there's also production-based, research-based, etc. So are we going to meet your requirements? So please go onto that website and have a good look. Find as much information as you can. You've spent 4 years studying for your degree. Don't spend 2 minutes studying for your job. Give it the respect it deserves, and spend a bit of time on there.
Yeah, and of course, to put that in a behavioural-based interviewing context, the argument would say, show that you'll work hard by working hard to get the job.
Yes, exactly.
Rather than telling the employer, if you employ me, I will work hard.
Yes.
To stick with that a moment, I'm going to come to your perspective, Keely and Vanessa, but to stick with that moment, so what is your attitude then to a candidate who says, I've really done my research, I went and met with a former ALS employee or something like that to really understand, and it sounds like a fabulous place to work, or if they start name dropping somebody who is at that site that they have researched, whatever, what's your attitude to that?
I'd be blown away. Yeah, definitely. I think when people show interest, and they show an interest that's out the box, they've actually, gone outside the box to find some information out. And that might just be, look, like you said, finding somebody they know or going that little bit extra, then I would be blown away by that. And that would put them to the top of the interview pile, because they're just showing that commitment to go as far as they can to give me that, yes, I've got drive, yes, I've got ambition, and yes, you want me to work at your company.
Excellent. Now, Vanessa, when you sit on a panel at the government level and somebody comes in and says, I've done my research about, you know, what this department does, or what this, I should probably actually say section or something like that, because departments are big, but sections are much, much more refined. And particularly if they name dropped, how will that go?
So if they've actually done their research, they will have looked at the website, they would have looked at the annual report, possibly the last few annual reports, and read the relevant sections of the annual report. They probably look at the media and see how the current media fits to the area that they're looking at. That also have looked at things like how their skill set fits with the priorities of the department or the organisation. If they've gone out and found people in the organisation and had a chat to them, and that demonstrates a level of proactiveness, but it also means that they've had a chance to speak to someone other than the point of contact about what it's like working there. And so they'll have a sense of probably what the culture's like, and some of those other sort of questions that come up that might not come up with a panel. So it's actually really good, and the level of proactiveness is really good. And a lot of people don't do it. A lot of people don't read the website, they don't read the annual report, and they'll say, oh yeah, I did, and then you ask like quite a basic question, and it's quite clear that actually they really haven't. So if you say you've done something, make sure that you have actually done it.
Well, that's of course something we learn very quickly in recruitment, isn't it? People lie. So Keely, your perspective, preparing for the interview.
Yeah, I just think one thing that can set you apart as well is having a look at the company website and looking for their visions and values. Oftentimes that's something that you can then use to your advantage during the interview to talk about some of the things, how you relate to their visions and values. And I think a lot of companies are really impressed that you've done the research to know what the vision and value is for the company, and then to relate it that way to something that you've done along the way.
Now, in your particular field, it is common enough for the company not to be disclosed in the job ad. At what point, like when a person comes for an interview, will they already know who the company is?
No. So typically it's more of a general interview with myself, so I can see how a person would interview with our clients. But then at that stage, when, you know, after that interview, if I feel confident that they're the right match for my client, then we talk about the company and the type of role that it is. And then I always prepare every individual with a preparation packet. And that preparation packet talks about who the interviewer is, what the company is, some of their, you know, vision and values and things like that, so that they're really ready for when they go into the interview. Just kind of thought of it now, but another thing that I often suggest to people is that they take the name of the interviewer that they're going to see and have a look on LinkedIn and click on their profile, because then the interviewer gets a notification that somebody's looked at their profile and that they see then that it is the person that's coming for an interview. So it really shows that you've gone the extra mile to look into not just the company, but the individual that you're meeting with.
Well, yes, you've taken a note right out of my playbook there, Keely. That's one of the things that I recommend. I actually go one step further, and I'd be very interested in your perspective. So I tell all of my students that it is a good idea to prepare notes and take those notes with you into the interview. Now, right, we'll see about this. But one of the things I say is make some notes about the person who is going to interview. Mm-hmm. And when you step into that interview, open your book to that page. Open your notebook to that page. Don't consult it, just open it to that page. Because the person will, because humans are being humans, will read their own name upside down and backwards, and will see that you have researched them. Your thoughts?
I've had that backfire for individuals because you're nervous in the midst of an interview anyhow. And if you do have notes in front of you, so many times I've seen those people look down at them and start reading them because they get so nervous in that situation. So I think while, you know, a more experienced interviewee might be able to do that and use it to their advantage. I think for graduates or early interviewees, then it's a lot more challenging not to rely on that piece of paper in front of them.
That's an interesting perspective. Yeah, interesting. So coming back to the question from before then, how does a candidate prepare for an interview with you if they don't know who the company is?
I don't necessarily good chat with an individual before they come in to see me. And, you know, I tell them, you know, there's no need for them to look into my company, but just to know that it's going to be more of a behavioral style interview with me, and to prepare how they would for a regular interview. So while they aren't able to do that research, it's my job as a consultant to consult with them to help them for the next stage when they are actually in front of the company. So that's my job, to make sure that they're ready for when they hit the actual company after.
And I guess it's worth noting that when somebody interviews with you, and possibly to some extent with you, Patricia, as well, they're not just interviewing for the position stated, but they're interviewing for every other job that you've got going that is potentially relevant to them, and the ones that have yet to be on the books.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly know that you may well do something very similar, both of you, but when I was, you know, as a recruitment consultant, we kept a list of what we called star candidates, and we would send a monthly newsletter to clients and say, with no names, of course, but we would say, we have a candidate who has this basic profile, and there would be 10 of them every month, and 2 of them would get picked up off the newsletter. Just people would say, oh, that sounds good. Yeah, let's have a chat about that. So
I've certainly gone to the stage of offering, you know, we've got somebody in for an interview, and maybe we've had two really good candidates, and the first thing I'm doing is phoning managers up saying, hey, have you got anything, is anything coming up? Can we fit this person in the company somehow? Because a good people, we want them in. It's as simple as that. And it might not be your ideal job at the time, but that might be a sort of fill-in job until that job comes up. So I would say take it, because your foot is in the door in the company, you're proving your worth, and the next time that, you know, the job that you're after comes up, you're sort of first on the line for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, now I apologise for looking away. I am watching the questions that are coming in on the board as well. So, seemingly obvious one. Are there any clothing's do's and don'ts?
Oh yes, so many. If that's okay, I'll jump in first. I've probably seen it all. Probably Pat, you too. You've seen it all with the way that people come in. But baseball caps, remove them before you go into an interview. I mean, it seems like such a simple thing, but the amount of times that I've had somebody interview with a baseball cap, I wouldn't even be able to count it on my 2 hands. Also sunnies, you know, I know it's a sunny country. I love Australia. I'm so happy that I'm here. But having your sunnies on top of the head, it's just not the best look. It's not really clothing related. Oh, don't wear thongs to an interview or flip-flops or whatever you want to call it. And, you know, high vis as well. It depends on the job that you're going for and, you know, what the requirements of the sites are. But if you're going for a formal interview, definitely want to dress to impress, and also making it quite conservative as well, especially for females, making sure that you're dressed more conservatively for that interview. Yeah, Pat, your turn.
Yeah, oh no, I must admit, I've not had too many people come in where I've gone, oh, what are you thinking about? Which, one thing to do though, and one thing I don't mind answering the question, if somebody says, you know, how should I dress to the interview? Do you want me to wear a suit? There's nothing wrong with that question. Now, we're quite an informal company. We, you know, management wear polo shirts, that sort of thing. So what I'll then say is, no, smart casual, you know, some sort of shirt, pants, shoes, obviously, which you have to ask. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with asking that question and finding out what sort of a company it is. And people will say, you know, if you need to wear a suit, they'll tell you need to wear a suit. But yeah, as Keely says, conservative. I mean, one thing we've got to face these days is the tattoos. They are prevalent. Not myself, but it's a generational thing. But I would say cover them if you can, because we might say that you have to cover them. And if you come in with them exposed, the assumption then is this, you know, is this your normal mode of dress? So to come into a place with lots of tattoos on is fine, but as long as you're covering them in an interview, I think that professionalism has to be on display. You're giving the interview the respect it deserves. You're not going to a barbecue, you're not going to the beach, you are going into a business meeting. So dress in a business-like manner.
Well, I mean, the fundamental issue of tattoos is that they are risky. You know, nobody is going to employ you because you have a tattoo, but there's a proportion, may not be a big proportion, of employers who will take a negative view of tattoos.
Yep.
So Vanessa, government jobs, is it three-piece suit all the way?
Not necessarily. So if I would agree with Patricia, like you can ask the contact officer what would be the appropriate dress to wear to the interview. If you don't have that opportunity, then it's better to dress more formally than less formally. Most interviews, smart casual is kind of the lower baseline. You're not going to be penalised for showing up in a suit.
Right. Now tell me, at the departmental coffee water cooler, shall I say, is everybody standing around in hazmat suits? Like, you know.
No, no. And every department is a bit different, and even branches and sections within departments are different. But if you really want, I guess, a way of getting a sense without reaching out to the contact officer, go and sit in a cafe that people from that department go to. And you know, a lot of departments have their own cafes kind of inside, and you can go and sit and have a coffee and see, well, look, everyone's wearing suits, or everyone's, you know, dressed smart casual. Oh, there's a group that are wearing jeans. Like you can really get a sense of what the people in the department are wearing just by sitting in the cafe.
That's an excellent one. Now, the next question I had on my list, and which is mirrors one that's come from the floor. We should start thinking about what's on the floor. The person on the floor has asked, how do I control my anxiety and be more confident? Vanessa, okay. Patricia, you go.
Yep.
Oh, go on, Noel. Practice. Simple as that. The expectation is, yes, you will be a little bit nervous. You're in a situation that maybe you're not familiar with, and the only way you become familiar is to practice. Get your mum, get your friends, get whoever to print some interview questions out, to sit you down, you walk in the room, don't shake the hands, bump their elbow, sit down and be interviewed, and just get familiar with what it would be like. Google YouTube, Google questions, but just keep practicing. To go into a situation with no experience and say, well, I've never done an interview before, I don't think that's good enough now. I think, again, it comes back to that research thing. You're researching your company, but also research what an interview is going to be like. Behavioural questions, what are they? And the more practice you've done, the more talking to yourself, doing it again and again and again, the more familiar you will be, and you've just got that bit more confidence in what you are going to say and how it's going to be, rather than just going into something that you've never done before.
Absolutely. Vanessa?
I would agree. Practice a lot. I tell people, write down 20, 30, 40 questions, stick them in a hat, and you can practice yourself. You can just pull a random question out and speak to whatever that question is for 5 minutes. It's all about just getting used to talking about yourself, talking about your skills and your experience in kind of 3 to 5 minute bursts on particular topics. Sure.
Although 5 minute bursts might be a little bit on the long side. We do try to keep it tight, right?
Well, in government, 5 minutes is probably more standard than that 3 minutes for a question.
Wow. I'm actually going to be very interested to come back and talk about what else is involved in a government interview. Is it just a panel, or do you do other sessions? But we'll come back to that afterwards. Keely?
Just everything they said. The more you practice, the better it becomes. You know, Vanessa was just talking about pulling some questions out of a hat. I think that's a wonderful idea. I think if you could take that even one step further and add a second person to the mix. So, you know, if it's your partner, your parent, your friend, somebody that can just randomly ask you some interview questions so that you've got that same setup that you are facing another individual when you're doing it. And if you don't have anybody to do that with, maybe practice in front of a mirror even, just to get yourself a little bit more comfortable in answering those kinds of questions.
I completely agree, but I also think it's important to remember that Firstly, nerves are natural and normal. It is a perfectly rational response to an intense stimulus. And as professionals across the board here, we are going to try to look past your nervousness to who is the person underneath. If you come to work for me as an employer, I know that once you've worked for me for a month or something, you're not going to be nervous. I'm trying to look at who's the person who's going to work for me, not who's the person just sitting in the room. So be a little forgiving of your nerves is what I'm saying. Keely, in your last presentation last week, because you're returning very rapidly, you'd also talked about always arrive to the interview a little bit early, but don't necessarily go in too early. But I also think that this directly relates to nerves, because if you are running late, your anxiety levels are going to be through the roof. So be that little bit early and calm down. Vanessa, by all means.
Yeah, I often tell people who ask my advice on this is to figure out the cafes in the area, get there an hour early, find out exactly where you're going to go, then go and sit and have a drink, take it easy, go to the bathroom, and show up where you need to be, often at the reception desk, about 10 minutes before your interview is due to start. Certainly no more than that, because the panel's not going to be ready at all. But it means you're where you need to be, and you don't have to worry about being late or worrying about transport or worrying about trying to find a car park, which can be really quite difficult at sometimes.
Now, you've just mentioned going to reception. Of the 3 panelists, how many of you ask after the interview, go to the reception person and ask, how did that candidate interact with you?
Me, straight away. Definitely. They're sort of the barometer. They do a lot of, we do a lot of sort of visa worker hiring, which is casual based. So they do a lot of hiring for me. So they are the barometer of how that person was and how they interacted. And it's just a simple thing, just a politeness. You don't have to be chatting away and having a conversation 9 to the dozen, but be polite to that first person you see, because they may be the last person. Usually I'm walking you out the door and I will turn around to receptionists and say, well, what did you think? And if they say, well, that person was rude, or you know, they look down on me, anything like this, yeah, that is a danger sign. So
yeah,
your impression,
sorry.
The impression is the minute you walk in that door, literally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. I am too small. I've only got 12 employees. I don't have a receptionist, but you can damn well be sure that if you come to an interview at my office, there will be somebody sitting at what looks like a reception desk who will greet you when you arrive. So now a more popular question that's coming through is, once I'm in the interview, after answering a question in the interview, I struggle to end the question and get them to ask the next question or confirm that I've fully answered the question. Is there any advice for wrapping up and turning it back to the interviewers?
Anybody on this one? Unfortunately, we sometimes leave a silence, because a person will try to then fill a silence. So occasionally it might be that we've not had enough information and we feel you've got more to say, or you could impress us more. You could actually deliver a bit more. So we will wait. But I don't think there's anything wrong with sort of saying, have I answered your question? Has that answered the question to your satisfaction? There's nothing wrong with saying that, because then that gives us an opportunity to say, well, actually, you know, we did want to know, blah, 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 etc. But that also then, it shows you've got confidence in your ability. You've answered the question, you've finished, and hey, next question, let's carry on. So not a problem with people saying, you know, is that enough? Have I answered the question? And we will carry on from there.
I imagine, Vanessa, that in a panel session at government, you would each have in front of you a piece of paper where the questions are predefined. There's probably rules about everybody has to be asked exactly the same questions, or more or less the same questions. And there's probably some sort of scoring system or something to try and be as quantitative, as fair as possible.
Yes, that's true. And also, in amongst it, if we haven't quite got the answer that we were after, we would ask some prompting questions. Like, we wouldn't just cut somebody off if they haven't asked the question. We might reword it. We might, you know, prompt them a little bit to try to get them to answer the question and give us the detail that we want. But right at the beginning, most panels will say, you know, we've got 45 minutes for 6 questions. And so if you think about the maths involved, how long should you be spending on each question? If you've given a response, it's like a minute or 2 minutes long, you kind of know as an interviewee that's probably not long enough, and there's probably something that's missing.
And of course, it will depend on the type of question, because we haven't even started talking about behavioural-based questions and the STAR story or the other acronyms that are applied. But of course, any of those STAR stories are necessarily going to be longer answers. Keely, I'm interested, when somebody answers a question, as example, let's say they start to ramble, at what point do you begin coaching a candidate, given that your role ultimately is both to select the candidates, but also to make sure that the candidates who go forward put their best foot forward? At what point, like, where do you draw the balance?
I tend to not stop them during the interview if I can help it. It depends on how much of a rant they're going off on, just because then, you know, it can throw somebody off, and, you know, I might not get the full impression of who the individual is just based on that. So usually it's at the end, you know, I'll ask, and I'm conscious of this. It's something that I learned quite a long while ago. I always ask, is it all right if I give you some feedback? Because some people are just not open to feedback. So I always ask the question, are you open to some feedback? And if they say that they are, then I will give them that true and honest reflection of their interview style. Obviously, if they're going forward to a company, then I will provide even more coaching around how we can improve. And sometimes I even go so far as to organize another interview with myself before the client interview, just to go over some of the things that are more specific to the company and client that they're going to meet with, and so that they have a chance to rehearse and then come back and visit with me again and go over some of that.
Excellent, excellent. And that would be truly valuable to most candidates. Patricia, what percentage of candidates ask for feedback from you?
Well, I mean, we give feedback anyway. So if anybody comes in for an interview, we would, you know, get back to them to say, you know, thanks, but no thanks. So I don't think that many people ask more questions along the line of why I didn't get the interview. Occasionally I would, but not a lot, surprisingly, which I think that's a bad sign. It shows that a lot of companies not giving any feedback, not even acknowledging that the person's been in for an interview, and therefore they don't expect it. So I think there's a bit of that in it, which is a bit of a shame. If somebody's taken the effort to come for an interview, we should at least give them some reply.
Yeah, so certainly reply, but I'm talking about constructive feedback. So, I mean, I will certainly say this. If a candidate said to me, why didn't I get the job? I'd feel quite confronted. If a candidate says to me, look, I know I didn't get the job, but I'd love to use this experience to its full extent. How can I improve? I would be very keen to assist them. And, you know, like I always say to candidates, you know, positivity is everything. Vanessa, are there any rules in government about giving feedback?
No, if people call me up after an interview round and they haven't been successful and ask for feedback, quite happily give them feedback, you know, chat to them for 10 or 20 minutes and talk them through the application process and the interview process so that they can really clearly see where they can improve. Don't get a huge amount of people calling up, but there's always a couple for every round. Yeah. And if they ask, that they get it. And I think that in a lot of this process, the interview process, if you ask the panel particular things, you'll find that they will be willing to do what you want. A lot of people just don't ask.
Okay, well, let's wrap up that question there. I almost got onto the subject of aggression there. Now, I read a very interesting article last week. It's actually on my website if anyone wants to look at my useful links, because I always pop up the ones that I find interesting. And one of the things that the interviewer in this article said is, I look for 3 things in an interview, and one of them is aggression. And any hint of aggression rules that candidate out straight away. What markers do you look for, Keely, that would spoil a person's chances very quickly?
That's a hard one. I think oftentimes if you're at, you know, as an interviewer, I'm often asking questions about difficult situations that they've had in the past. So these are the types of questions that could lead to somebody's, you know, aggressive nature to come out, or negativity, or, you know, one thing I hate to hear about is, you know, a past employer. You know, a lot of people will speak so poorly about a past employer. And I just think there's so many better ways that you can talk about a situation that you've had with a past employer that puts it more into a positive light, and it reflects better on you as an individual as well. As far as aggressive behaviors and how you identify those, I'm not really sure. I'm not a psychologist myself. I've certainly experienced some aggressive behavior within an interview, to the point early in my career, I had someone that I actually started to feel uncomfortable in the interview. And the way that our interview rooms are set up is that I'm facing out towards the door, but there's the person between me and the door. And I actually started to think in panic that how am I going to get out of this door, because I was worried about the other individual on the other side. So it does, you know, aggressive nature does come out oftentimes in an interview. And I wish I remembered what caused that aggressive nature to come out, because I'd love to share it with everyone, but I just can't put my finger on it and how that came about.
And you did mention, I mean, look, you know, naked aggression is going to be vanishingly rare, but I guess what we're talking about aggressive indicators. So in this particular example in the article, somebody talked about, they were talking about their previous employer in very negative terms. They had been asked the question, what would your previous employer say about you? And they basically answered, I made it very clear to them that it would be dangerous for them to badmouth me.
Never had anything that far.
Well, goodness gracious. So, Patricia, then how does someone handle, okay, they've left their past employer, the past employer, let's say there was genuinely an a-hole. How can they put a positive spin on that when they're talking to you?
As in a positive spin on what the company.
Yeah, so, I mean, okay, why did you leave your last employer?
Yeah.
Oh, that's my last employer. Because we had a difference of opinion.
I think you'd have to. I mean, obviously, we don't want people to lie. But if you, for example, you say, I left that job because it was a dead-end job, that just suggests apathy. Whereas you could put it that I didn't think there were opportunities that would allow me to further my career in that role, so I'm looking for another job. So that's sort of you're saying exactly the same thing, but you put in a positive spin on it. You're saying, hey, it wasn't enough for me, and I'm going to go further because I'm career driven. Whereas saying, you know, it's a dead end job, that's, like I say, it just sounds apathetic. So just be aware of, you know, we don't want you to lie, if possible, but do be aware of trying to make a positive out of a negative. I can't think of any others. If somebody said, for example, I left a company because they weren't safety conscious. Now, that is a negative, but that is not a negative that would bother me. In fact, I would say, great, I'm glad you are safety conscious, because we are. Safety is our priority. So occasionally you can get away with, you know, blunt truth, but just be aware of how it reflects on you. I was saying I didn't get up, you know, all the managers were this or all the managers were that. The immediate thought subconsciously is, was that you? Was that them, or was that you? So just be aware of. Keely talked about values before, core value, you know, company values, saying that their values didn't align with my values. Now, you're saying the same thing as the managers are a bunch of a-holes, but you haven't said that. You've just said something positive that's put you in a positive light without really bagging out the company. So there are ways of doing it. You have to go have a good think about how you're coming across and what sort of impression you're giving.
And of course, I always like the fallback. I was ready for my next challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the truth.
Vanessa, do you get some doozies in the government side? You know, people who've sort of, I don't know, I'm burned out with the commercial sector. I want to end, you know, I want to be safe in government or something like that.
No, but in the kind of work that I do, like in the Chemical Weapons Convention, sometimes you get people who don't understand that that's like a regulator, and it's a regulatory job. But they apply and they want something more like James Bond. They want to be doing fun stuff. They see the word chemical weapons, and they think, you know, it's going to be really exciting. And I do find my job very exciting, but it's not the kind of job that a lot of people actually think that they're applying for. So yeah, I think it's important just to really try to sort of manage expectations in some of the jobs. But I do think the importance of values, and one of the things that when people are talking about like changing from different organisations, they talk about the culture, because there are some really incredible jobs around, some really interesting jobs, but if your sort of core values don't align with that organisation, or you don't fit within the culture, it can be quite toxic. So I actually, the candidates that actually ask about what is the culture of the organisation that they're applying for, I rate them quite highly, because they're really considering not just the work they're doing, but how they're going to fit in that organisation.
Yeah. And look, my wife worked for government for 10 years, and the thing that she always said was she truly believed in those two key words: public service. You know, she didn't want a commercial job. She wanted to be doing something that was contributing to the people of this country. And that was, you know, that was her philosophical bent. And, you know, surely I would imagine that that sort of thing would play very well in an interview when it comes through with sincerity. Now, I've got a question, it's rating at the moment. So I think it'd be good to be open and honest when I'm being interviewed, but I've wondered in the past if I've not sold myself as much or as well as I could have. Am I selling myself short by trying to be open and honest, and should I focus more on being exclusively positive about my skills and experience? I'm not sure that those two are mutually exclusive. I think you can be positive. I think you can be positive about anything in life, but who wants to have a go? The selling yourself in an interview.
I think I'm a great believer in walking into an interview and saying to yourself, I am the best person for this job. If you haven't got all the skills we need, we can teach you. Just having that belief that this is the job that you really want and you are the best person for this job. I think what that gives to your sort of confidence as you walk in the room, you are selling yourself then, because what you're telling me is, hey, I'm the best candidate. I'm the best person you're going to have walking in this door today. So if you can sort of have that confidence in your abilities, and if you believe it, obviously you've got to believe it as well, but having that confidence will automatically make you come across in a confident manner, and you're not lying, you're being honest to yourself, but believe that you are the best person for that job. Honesty when it comes to maybe not knowing everything you need to know, I think that's better telling us before you get the job than after you get the job and we expect you to do something. Would it cost you the interview if we wanted a specific skill, we wanted instrumentation experience, and somebody has not got and honestly tells us, yeah, you might not get the job, but you might also get another job. You know, if we like you as a person, you might not fit that role, but you might actually fit somewhere else in the company. So you've got to be honest to a certain extent, because we are going to put you in that job one day, and you've got to be able to do it. You've got to be able to, fit in that box. So honesty, yes. I know what you mean. Sometimes you can be self-depreciating, and you sort of go afterwards, oh, why did I tell them that? Why didn't I say I was wonderful at that? So focus on your good points, sell your good points as much as you can. But if it comes to things that you cannot do, have a certain amount of honesty towards that and say, but honesty again, and put a positive, yes, I don't know that, but hey, I've just finished this degree, I'm good at research, etc. I have the ability to research, and one of the things I'm good at is blah, blah, blah. So put a positive spin on the back of saying you're not as good as that as maybe you would like to be.
Well, and I think there's also, having that realistic aspect is very good in a recent graduate. There are too many recent graduates who, and I was guilty of this when I first graduated, who think they're hot stuff, who think that because they've got a degree that they know everything, when in fact they know virtually nothing. I think that it's a very healthy thing for somebody to be self-aware enough to say, there is stuff I don't know, but gee, I'm keen to learn. Mm. Keely, your perspectives?
Yeah, exactly the same. You know, what you just said resonated with me, because at uni you learn so much of the theoretical, but you're lacking in the practical. And it's how do you get those two to kind of come together so you get that practical experience. But exactly what Pat was saying, you know, is putting a positive spin on things, making sure that, you know, if they ask you about a particular piece of instrumentation, you know, you can say, I've learned about it, I've done it in my lab courses at university. However, and then giving giving an example of something that you learned very quickly to show that you've got that ability to learn quickly, you know, that willingness to learn. I'm determined. I'm determined to be in this position for this, you know, and expand my career this way. I think it goes a long way. And you can actually, with those spins, you can almost get some different points in before the questions come. So sometimes you can help yourself by getting to a topic that you wanted to raise in an interview, but maybe wouldn't have had the chance in another time.
I will, Vanessa, I'll come to you in a sec. I will quickly say so we have been porting a lot of stuff across to the new RACI website, but it's not all there yet. I have my own website that I put up, dcstechnical.com.au, and it has a careers section. I have a careers blog there, and I've actually, one of my blog posts is called, "To be successful in an interview, you have to be un-Australian." And the idea is that as Australians, we're taught to be self-deprecating. We're taught to not big note ourselves. Yet the interview is the one time in your life where that's exactly what you've got to do. You've got to be willing and stand up and say, "I'm great." You know, you can go too far with that, but
yes,
within limits, it's just great. Vanessa, sell yourself in a government interview.
Yeah, so I guess back to the point about whether you don't have all the skills or not. Often in government interviews, they will say what skills are essential and what skills are desirable. Those are skills and experience. So if you don't have a skill or experience that is marked as essential, even if you put an application in, you may not get shortlisted, because if they've said that you have to be able to do a particular thing, that's what they're really looking for. But if you don't have something that they've got marked as desirable, then as Keely mentioned, talk about how do you learn? How, you know, do you learn quickly? How do you improve your skill set? What have you done in other aspects of your life to show that you have the skills to be able to you know, broaden your knowledge and experience? Not having a particular sort of thing that's listed as a criteria is not going to mean that you won't get shortlisted. But you've got to be able to demonstrate how you'd be able to gain those skills.
You're absolutely right, Vanessa. And this is a critical point. We live in the era of the internet. There is nothing that you cannot find out. So if there is something that is desirable that you don't have, there is nothing to stop you going on and researching that thing and saying, well, I don't have any experience with it, but I spent 6 hours researching it, and I'd like to think I have at least a basic understanding of the terminology now. Right? And it's about that behavior, isn't it, Keely? That's saying, I care enough about this job to put the effort in to say, even what I don't know, I'm going to find out about. That's a bit strident on my part, wasn't it? Bathika has asked, and Bathika I've met is great, has asked the question very similar. How do I deal with technical questions during the interview? Sometimes the techniques are not familiar to the interviewees, then how to deal with that situation. Well, again, hopefully you've done your research so that you know in advance the sort of techniques that are going to be relevant.
I mean, look at the job description on Seek. If it says MS experience and you've no MS, you know, look it up, see what you need to know. It will you usually find enough in the, you know, in the job description. We don't want people applying who have no experience whatsoever in instruments when we need instrument experience. So it will give you an indication of what you need to know. So have a look at that. If there's any gaps there, like you say, go and have a research, have a look into it and show you're interested.
But you can also show a little bit of imagination, Patricia. You know, so for instance, if it is a minerals laboratory, you can imagine that it's going to, you know, even if it's not stated in the ad, you know that it's going to be atomic absorption spectroscopy, it's going to be ICP, it's going to be particle size, things like that. If it is an environmental water sampling, then it's going to be pH, it's going to be organics, HPLC, GC, something like that. You can guess a lot of this stuff in advance with a little bit of imagination. Or you can call up the RACI and say, I'm interested in this position, is there someone I can talk to who might be able to tell me a little bit about this stuff and how I can better prepare for the interview?
Yeah, exactly.
Because we'll do that. You know, every single one of you as a member can call up your local state branch at any time, or you can email me and I'll help you, and we'll get you those introductions. I'm just looking at what else. Okay. Oh, I love this one. Caspar, good on you for asking. If you feel or think that you haven't been asked a question that best reflects your value to add to position, how do you create an opportunity in the interview to express this? Go for it, Vanessa.
Yeah. So in most government jobs, there's an opportunity right at the end for the interviewee to ask any additional questions or to make a statement. And so it's always, I find it's really good when people do ask a question, because it shows they've really thought about position and what's going on. But also, if there's something that you really want the panel to know and you haven't said it yet, that's the point to say it. And yeah, absolutely no problem at all.
Yeah, don't walk out the room without having said it. I always say, look, I say every candidate, you should have an idea in your own head, if only for your own sanity, about what makes you special. And if the interviewer hasn't asked, damn well tell them. I assume, Patricia, you wouldn't have a problem with someone saying no.
And to me, it would leave a good, especially as a sort of last impression. You know, you've asked a couple of questions and you've said, look, I really feel I'm good at blah, 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 etc. It would leave a really good impression. It's, you know, if you like, it's your parting shot across the bows, and make it a good one. If it's saying, you know, your strength, your skills, that's the last thing we'll know before we walk out the room. So definitely.
Heck yeah.
A good one.
All right. And with that in mind then, what's a bad question to ask?
What is the salary, or how much does it pay?
Really?
It's the holidays.
See,
how many holidays?
Yeah, holidays I get. Yeah. But salary, to me, that's a fair question. This is a business transaction. I have to know whether it's the right fit for them. Is that not a fair question? Not
in government interviews. So the discussions about salary normally happen with HR after the candidate's kind of selected. So the panel has no ability to really influence salaries. And
well, they can name a band.
Well, it'll be in the ad. So the people have applied for the band, and it'll have a salary range.
Okay, but okay. Yeah. So we're talking about when the salary is unknown to the client, to the candidate. Okay. Surely it's a fair question to ask, what's it pay?
I think a question near the end rather than at the beginning.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. So if you're walking in going, right, what am I going to get paid? What's etc.
Yeah, no, I think it's reasonable to say, I think this sounds absolutely fabulous, but I have to ask, what does it pay?
Yeah.
Keely,
and we do tell people.
Because you're looking dubious here, Keely, so...
I don't like the question. Personally, maybe it's a personal opinion, but I don't like the question. I think most of the time an interviewer is going to ask somebody's salary expectations anyways. But if they haven't asked the question, I don't feel it's appropriate. It kind of gives the wrong impression as to why you're interested in the role. And it kind of can make the interviewer think that it's only a monetary gain that is leading to the interest in this particular position. I think it's more important to make sure that it aligns with your values, you know, what kind of culture, you know, what kind of position in your growth path for your career. And I always like when people say that the money doesn't matter, that it's more about getting the opportunity and to grow their career. I think those individuals tend to work out better in the position anyhow. Obviously, salary is going to be discussed before you start in the job anyways. You know, it might be at the offer stage, and then there's always room for a little bit of a negotiation then. You know, if they've offered you something that's just way below what, you know, you can, you know, live on, or you feel is fair for your skills and so on, that's a good point to start the discussion around, you know, a bit of a negotiation around, you know, is there any, you know, any wiggle room in that? Is there any chance for after 6 months for there to be a review, that sort of thing? But I personally don't think it's an appropriate question for an interviewee to ask of an interviewer in that interview process.
Well, there you go, listeners. Take from that what you will, because I'm not sure that we've given you a good... I will probably say at the early career chemist, it's probably less important of a question because the range of salaries at the beginning of your career is going to be quite narrow. And a few thousand here or a few thousand there really is not that important in the scheme of things compared to the experience you're going to get. For someone like me, 20 years into my career, it is obviously a vitally important question because it could be many tens of thousands of dollars of difference. So, yeah. It's interesting that I love it when we disagree. Okay, there's a couple of other questions here, but I'm going to skip back to our planned questions for a moment. Apologies, I'm doing this very badly, aren't I? In the scenario where you've received an interview but you don't meet one or two of the requirements stated in the ad, do you bring it up yourself in the interview? We talked about desirable qualities a moment ago, but do you actually do you face it head on? Is the question.
I don't know. I think if it's something that was mentioned as Vanessa said, a vital part of the role, I think you would have to, because otherwise you might be interviewed for an hour and then at the end of it, well, you can't even have the job because you haven't got this experience. So I think, yeah, but don't undersell yourself on that point as well, or don't seem to undersell yourself on that point. But if it is vital to the role, I think it's something you have to mention straight away, because it might cut the interview short, but you wouldn't be able to get that job anyway. But they might carry on interviewing you for another job instead. So that honesty and accepting your limitations is a good thing, especially when it's vital. I think if it's required, upsell yourself first. Give yourself an upsell on what you can do and what you are bringing to the role before you sort of say, well, I haven't had a lot of experience with XXX. So slide it in at the end somewhere rather than put it front and center, unless it's vital to the actual role itself. And then be honest, and we'll go from there.
Fair enough. Other perspectives? Okay, all right. Yeah, go.
I think it really depends on what it is, like, and how you respond to it. So I've seen some jobs where it said that having a driver's license is desirable. And that's because you end up driving people around and stuff like that. So you could actually say, look, you notice that this particular thing is marked as desirable. I don't have that skill, but I can do X, Y, Z to address it. Or even actually ask them, like, why have you got this requirement? And you might have different skills that can actually do the same thing.
Fair enough. Do you want to dip your oar in the water there, Keely, or are you right?
I think a lot of that would come out in a phone screen anyhow, so that first initial conversation that you have before you're invited to an interview, if it is actually a requirement, the person who calls you is going to be going through that list of criteria to ensure that you've got all of those, and you can address each and every one as you go along, and that way you're not wasting either side's time. But if they've invited you for an interview, likely that's not such a big problem if there's one piece of the puzzle missing. So I think, just be yourself and try to overcome any obstacles along the way during the course of the interview.
Okay. Well, good. Now, I'm aware of the passage of time, so I want to bookend the interview. Do you have, Patricia, a favourite question that you open an interview with?
I always open an interview with, what can you tell me about ALS? That is my first question, because I want them to speak. I think it puts people at ease when they're speaking. They should be able to answer that question well, because gosh, they've been researching our company for such a long time. So that's always my opener, is, apart from how's the weather and did you find us okay, is what can you tell me about ALS? And that is my always opener. And that will tell me straight away how much that person has researched. We had somebody last week, well, not last week, a couple of weeks ago, interview for a HSE role, and I said, what can you tell me about ALS? He actually told me more than I knew from our website, because number one, it told me his research was excellent, and also his memory, his retention was excellent as well, because these were things that he didn't necessarily need to retain, but he did. So that told me two things about this person. Straight away, first question. So he was on a winner then, and we have employed him. But that's always my first.
And it's very good advice that to be prepared for that sort of thing as your first question. Do you ever ask, how did you prepare for this interview?
Oh, I've never asked. No, I've never asked that question.
Okay. That's a personal favourite of mine.
Yeah, no, good idea. Again, you're finding out how much somebody has done. I'll put that on the list. Might be my next favourite.
Yeah, I usually open with just, tell me about yourself. The elevator pitch, that's one that hopefully you've prepared for and are ready to give all your selling qualities along the way. I also find that it puts people at ease, when they're talking about themselves. They often, it kind of lets those nerves get out of the way. And I think, it's my job interim between them and a company ultimately anyways. So I think it's their practice round. So I want them to be as comfortable as possible so that they're not anxious for the next step along the way either. So yeah, it's my favorite. I just like them to tell me about themselves. Okay.
So sticking with that for a moment then, is there a good or a bad way to answer that question?
I think an elevator pitch should be no more than 2 minutes. So I think, making sure that you touch on all the things that you feel are your selling features in that time, and give somebody just a little bit of a snapshot of your personality as well. And one thing that we haven't talked about today is smile goes such a long way when you're interviewing. It's my biggest tip for people when they go to an interview, because it just gives the wrong impression if you're not smiling. So it's such a little thing, but can make such a huge difference during the course of the interview.
It's interesting because I also open with tell me about yourself, and I make a fairly quick judgment about a candidate based on that question. I'll give them a chance after that, but I make a quick judgment. If they simply regurgitate their resume to me, their stocks go way down. What I'm looking for is personality. I'm looking for, tell me what you're passionate about. Tell me what drives you. Tell me all the things that I can't learn by having read your resume. That's what excites me in an answer to that question. Vanessa, what does a government interview begin with?
It's varied. Every panel is different. Normally there would be some kind of 2, 3, 4 minute introduction about what's going to happen in the process, and then there would be probably normally 4 to 6 questions, and they would touch on the different selection criteria, so technical skills. There's also normally some scenario-based questions, like tell us about a situation where you dealt with a difficult work colleague or something like that. But every panel is different. There's no kind of sort of set questions that are used.
Yeah. Now, of course, what you've just described there is what we describe in recruitment as behavioural-based interviewing, that the best predictor of your future behaviour is your past behaviour. And so rather than asking you in this scenario, what would you do, we ask you a question about when you're faced with a similar scenario, what did you do? And what does that tell us about your behaviours? Behavioural-based questions, you can read all about them online. I strongly encourage you to read about them and to actually prepare some, because they fall into a very small number of categories. It's about dealing with conflict in the workplace. It's about times when you have excelled, times when you've gone over and above. And what's the third category that I'm missing, Keely? Patricia? Of course, I'm blanking because I'm pontificating.
And I'm blanking to put me on the spot. I remember the first two.
Anyway, look, so I've actually written an article. It's on my website, all about star stories and how to excel in behaviour-based interviewing. We could spend an hour just on that, which we're not going to right now. So bookending the interview then, how should a candidate follow up after the interview has happened? Go for it, Vanessa. You look like you want to respond.
Yep. I always find it really weird if interviewees contact me to say thanks for interviewing me or something like that. Normally, the process can take quite a while, and so very happy for people to call up to check in, at the 2 week or the 4 week mark. But if in the interview it's discussed, the panel would normally give the interviewee a sense of how long it's going to take. So if they say, look, we're hoping to contact referees in 3 weeks, and your referees haven't been contacted in 4 weeks, then I think it's really good just to check in and sort of get a sense of where things are happening. Leaving it and not checking in, I think is problematic, because you're not showing that you're proactive, you're not really showing that you're interested in the position. So you do want to check in, but you don't want to be checking in too early, because in government the processes can take time.
Yes, now you're absolutely right, and that's about. My question was mostly about that immediate follow-up, and I'm very interested to hear you say I find it a bit weird. Before I give my 2 cents, I'd like to hear everybody else's. So how should someone follow up with you, Patricia?
Oh, sorry. I've only had, it's funny when Vanessa said weird, I kind of agree, because I've only ever had, I think, one person who's emailed me and said, thank you for the interview. And it was like, whoa, I've never seen this before. So it's weird. It's unusual. I found it very, I think we gave that person the job from memory. And one of the reasons was that sort of politeness, that, proactive, well, thanks for interviewing me. And it is very unusual. And if you do want to stand out from the crowd, hey, get the business card on the way out and just shoot an email through, because it certainly impressed me. And it's very rarely done. It's really, really rare. Yeah.
I mean, the whole point is the recruitment process. You're trying to stand out from the crowd. What a simple and fabulous way to stand out from the crowd. Only thing is, I wouldn't just say thank you for the interview. Of course, I say thank you for the interview, but I also say the job sounds excellent. I'm really eager, and I very much hope that I'm considered for the next step. Reinforce that positivity in that email. It gives you just another chance to say this is great.
Mm.
Right?
And like I say, it stands out because it's just so unusual that people do it. So obviously everybody on here will now be doing it, but it definitely is. And just, you're just reiterating yourself again. It's that parting shot. Again, you've done it again, and it's not intrusive. You're not sort of phoning up and saying, have I got the job yet? You're saying, hey, I'm confident. I think I've got the job, and thanks for the opportunity, but I really want to get this job. Yeah. Why not?
That's so simple to do.
Yeah, I love it. I love it when you get a follow-up email. And as the ladies have said, it doesn't happen as often as it should, but it kind of makes you feel a little bit warm and bubbly inside when somebody does it. And it does put that individual front of mind. And, it's very nice touch. And I've had it a couple of times where after I've had somebody go and interview at a client, usually I'm kind of a liaison in between. And so I'll get an email saying, can you please thank them for taking the time to meet with me? So I think it's definitely a nice touch and something that more people should be doing, because it's definitely, I get all warm and fuzzy inside.
Look, there's plenty that's sucked about the old world, but some of the old world courtesies is something that's lacking in the modern era, and you can just so easily distinguish yourself with those simple things.
Dave, I'll just give you an example of where I did have someone contact me where it didn't go so well for them. So we'd had the interview and they'd given us all the information, and then we reminded them that we're going to be contacting referees. And about 2 hours after the interview, they called me up to say, actually, when I answered this particular question in the interview, I didn't actually give you the truth, and this is the truth. So if you contact my referees, this is what they will say. I'm really sorry. I hope it doesn't damage my interview chances. So my advice to people is tell the truth, and make sure that your referees, know what you are saying, so that they actually say the same thing. But yeah, just don't lie. If you don't have the experience, or if there's something in particular that you really, you don't want to get yourself caught out, because that person, they just dropped straight to the bottom of the list, because integrity is one of the key things that we were looking for, and this person clearly demonstrated that they didn't have as much integrity as we needed.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I had a heartbreaking circumstance when I was a recruitment consultant. Had this fabulous candidate. He was new to Australia. He had taken the standard backdoor immigration route. So he'd gone to New Zealand. He'd done a 3-year PhD, became a New Zealand citizen, and jumped on the first plane to Australia. That's the big backdoor to Australia. And as recruitment consultants, we know that this is how it happens. But what he had done is he had lied about that 3 years in New Zealand to cover up that he had a PhD, because in some cases PhDs can actually make it difficult to get a job in Australia. And the whole thing didn't add up to me, and I queried and I queried and I queried until it finally came out, yeah, I went to New Zealand and I did a PhD. And I loved this guy. I thought he would be fabulous for the job, but I could not, heartbreakingly, I could not put him forward to the client. I was prevented from doing so. So, I'm a strong advocate of let the chips fall where they may. Be honest, and just, if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. There'll be another job. Keely, how many people lie to you?
Too many times to count. I'm pretty good at sniffing it out these days, though. And, obviously the reference checking aspect really kind of weeds that out anyways, which is quite good. But yeah, just don't lie. It's just easier to tell the truth.
The other one is, people will send you an application, and then they'll send you an application 2 years later. And if the resumes are different, you're going to know.
Sure am.
The number of times I hear about people getting caught out that way when they're applying to recruiters blows me away. Okay, so we do need to wrap up, so we'll just quickly check the questions that are left. Someone has asked, I'm a minimalist, try saying that 3 times quickly, with respect to technology. I worry that not using and updating LinkedIn, Twitter and the like will affect my job opportunities. I say yes to LinkedIn and no to everything else.
Agree. I don't think I'd bother if anybody wasn't on Facebook, Twitter, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But LinkedIn's good. Keep it on
LinkedIn. It's an interesting point, Patricia, Keely, maybe even Vanessa. When I'm interested in a candidate, so once I've interviewed them and I'm interested, I then assign one of my employees to trawl through social media and look at what they have posted online. And if anything they have posted online comes across as being a risk to my business, they don't get the job. It's in my blog post, it's called Anti-Social Media. Do any of you do the same?
No, I've not done anything like that, and the panels that I've been on haven't done that.
Right. Keely, what about you?
No, but interestingly, I've heard a lot of other recruiters' perspective on that, and they often check for the person on Facebook to see what kind of pictures have been put up. And I think, a good test for yourself is to Google your own name and see what the first images are to come up on there, because you want to make sure that whatever is out there in the world is a positive impression of yourself.
Yeah. And if every photo on Facebook is of you getting wasted on the weekend, I, as an employer, am going to worry, are you going to turn up on Monday? Right? I once worked for a company where one of the employees took 36 Mondays off in a year.
Nice.
Okay, another question. Now I am doing postgraduate studies and have a previous experience overseas as a process engineer. So when I get an interview, what should I focus? My previous experience, my postgraduate studies, or my soft skills? Presumably that means that they've got limited experience in Australia.
All of the above. Yeah, just use it all to your advantage and answer the questions put to you in the best way possible using the experiences and the skills that you already have. Just because they're overseas doesn't mean that they aren't relevant here in Australia.
Yeah. Somebody made the, was it you, Keely, who made the comment in another presentation recently that said, if you're from overseas, and you're particularly if you're in a manufacturing and process background, chances are you've already worked to ISO standards or FDA standards or various other things that, although it's not Australian experience, it is nonetheless directly relevant to the Australian workplace. And if you have that sort of thing, for goodness sake, mention it, you know, raise it, because it is directly relevant. Patricia?
It wasn't me, but it sounds like something I would say.
Well, it was a perspective I hadn't heard before, and I thought it was very, very useful. I will be trumpeting that piece of advice to all of our overseas learners. So, Patricia, overseas experience, how does it count for you?
As good as it's. I mean, it's the same as an overseas degree, I suppose. It's relevant as long as the experience is relevant. If somebody has worked in a laboratory abroad, they have worked in a laboratory. They know it's the same processes used. It will be very different. I mean, our laboratories, for example, they're global. Everything is done the same in every laboratory within ALS. So I would expect that any experience they have to, to filter through will be relevant, same as a degree. Soft skills are soft skills. Just sell yourself, sell everything you have. That's what you're here for, is sell yourself.
Yeah, and you can practice. You know, again, you can reach out to us as a member. You can reach out to us and practice with us. We'll pair you with someone and do practice interviews with you and all that sort of stuff. We want to help. Harking way back to the beginning, this question, I missed it along the way, Keely, but it was specifically for you. You said that one should dress more conservative, especially females. What do you mean by that? I am not very feminine. Well, I'm sure I'm not very feminine.
I think low cut should be avoided as much as possible. You can have a V-neck, that's fine, but if it's really, cutting low and exposing some things that aren't relevant for the workplace, then I think you should avoid that in your outfit choices. You're not going out at the weekend with a bunch of friends. You're in a professional environment, and I think that you just need to make sure that you're presenting yourself in that environment.
Frankly, Keely, I will echo that. If you come into an interview with me wearing a low-cut top, I will be uncomfortable. I will feel at risk of misunderstandings or whatever, and I will be uncomfortable. You don't want to be interviewing with me while I'm uncomfortable. That's not helping. So, okay, and one fun question to finish. Can we give some advice to undergraduate students, or really anybody early in their career, who have limited industrial experience, but let's just put it limited experience, but actively looking for internships and work experience? And that's particularly relevant during the COVID era, because as Patricia, was speaking at the beginning, ALS isn't offering work experience at the moment. So how does somebody, particularly now, get some experience so they can go to Keely and say, I've got some experience?
Very difficult. I'd say apply for any jobs, even though you might not think it's somewhere where you want to be for the rest of your life. At least get some industry experience, or any industry experience that will translate to, a scientific job you might be going into. We're a production laboratory. We're sort of fast-paced. There's a lot of a sense of urgency is needed in our role. So somebody who's worked in believe it or not, Maccas, we love them, because they used to working under pressure. Everything has to be the same. You have to do exactly as you are told. That sort of an experience is relevant. So don't imagine that just because you've not worked in a scientific industry that all the experience you have is not relevant. Somebody who's coached a football team, they're used to working with people. They're used to interacting, getting the most out of people. So you'll be surprised how much experience you have without having that specific experience. But if you can get a job, even if it's a short-term job you see, grab it. Go and grab it, do it for a while, and then you're going to Keely and saying, hey, I've got this experience in this. If we've got sort of, an entry-level position, and you think, well, that's not where I want to be eventually, go and do it for a while. The people are accepting of people who want to eventually move on, but that entry-level position might lead to what you do want, a chemist position one day anyway. So
I would imagine that somebody who starts at ALS would probably start in something like sample prep.
Not necessarily. If anybody's sort of done either a degree or even TAFE qualifications in lab techniques, we tend to put them in geochemistry, so it will be in our geochemistry lab. So that's our sort of basic entry-level position for people who want to go into the science industry. And we do get people in there with degrees. They'll do that for a couple of years. They get to know exactly what we do, and then when a job comes up in spectroscopy and instrumentation, they're straight across then, literally, because it's across the corridor. So yeah, that's our entry level. You can go in prep. You can also go in fire assay. Any guys out there who want something really exciting, fire assay, yeah, brilliant stuff. So yeah, there's lots of opportunity to go in at that entry level and then just work your way through a company.
Yeah, I guess the point is, like any entry level position, it's still important to the company.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
You know, like, I mean, taking sample prep as the example, if the samples aren't properly prepped, if they aren't properly labeled, then garbage in equals garbage out. So it's still a critically important role to the company. Just because it's not high profile doesn't mean it's not important.
Oh, exactly.
And doing that job well is important to the company.
And it's an area that we spend a lot of time making sure our staff are happy, motivated, engaged. Because, like you say, if they're not engaged in what they're doing, it's wrong throughout the rest of the process. So there is a lot of focus on keeping those guys happy. And people who come in and do that job, you're more likely to be a manager one day, because if you've done sample prep, you've gone into geochemistry, spectral, you know exactly what we do throughout the whole company. So if your aim one day is management, get to know every part of the company. Don't just come in and work in, I can only work in spectral. Go everywhere you can. The more experience you have, the more you know about the company, and the more likely you are to go higher up in the company.
That's a very interesting aspect. Vanessa, how does someone get experience that is relevant to government?
It would, I guess, depend a lot on the position, but as Patricia mentioned, there's a lot of skill sets that are applicable, even though they might not sound applicable. So, volunteering with your kids, sporting group, and managing sporting teams. Sorry, my kids are just going to bed. It's a matter of, I actually tell people to keep almost like a journal, and just to keep track of all the different things that they do. And so when they're looking for particular things for selection criteria, you don't have to be answering something that is directly relevant to government. You're looking for those skills and experiences in any aspect of your life. And, working at McDonald's does have directly relevant skills. So I guess try not to be narrow-minded, and when you're thinking about whether you have skills or experience in particular areas. And the key thing is being able to demonstrate to the panel that you've got them. So it's just a matter of thinking about it and then capturing it in a way that leads the panel on a journey to demonstrate the skills and experience.
Absolutely. Well said, Vanessa. So Keely, you can by all means talk about experience, but you also have, what is it, the Future Scientist Award?
Yes, that's correct.
And so this might be the right time to talk about that.
Okay, sure. I love talking about the Future Scientist Award. So for any of you that don't know about it, the Future Scientist Award is an opportunity to present yourself, if you're a finalist, in front of a group of hiring managers. So we, every year in 5 states around the country, we have the Future Scientist Awards, and there's usually anywhere between 10 and 14 companies represented on our panel, and they have the opportunity to hire anyone that they see on the day. So it's kind of like a reverse interview. Instead of you going out on 10 to 14 interviews, 10 to 14 companies come to see you present to the panel. So it's a great opportunity. It is going to be rebranded with our new brand launching on the 1st of October. So around the 2nd to 3rd week of October, you'll start to see the advertising for our Future Scientist Award. And we will be having the finals in February. So applications closing in January with our finals in February. So make sure you're looking out for that. Make sure that you apply if you're eligible. And yeah, I can't tell you how successful it's been. Each year we've had at least 50% success rate. So of 8 finalists, we've had at least half of them gain full-time employment as a result of the program. So yeah, just go for it.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we've pretty much reached our time. I know we do have a couple more questions, but I don't think we're going to get to them. However, having said that, Bathika, I do see your question. Could you stay around for a little bit? I would like to have a quick chat with you and Patricia after this, if possible. Let's conclude. Let me get my script up. Tonight has been another event as part of the RACI Careers Development Program. Through webinars, networking events, mentoring, lectures and workshops, the RACI Careers Development Program aims to help early career scientists get the best possible start and growth in their careers. Now, we have a bunch of upcoming career events. We have the online networking camaraderie. The next event is on the 1st of October at 5 p.m. Sydney time. Our next careers webinar is Success with LinkedIn. That's on the Thursday 15th of October. And in between the two, Thursday 8th of October, we're going to be trialing this wonderful new thing. We're going to get a panel of people just like this. We're calling it Careers Hack. And people who are actively looking for jobs, we'll promote you up. We'll have a chat with you about what sort of job you're looking for, and we'll actually work on a strategy that you can employ right then. And if you're a RACI member, we'll even follow up with introductions to people to get you started on your job search. Now, also quickly mention the RACI mentoring program. We're not quite full yet, so we still do have a few opportunities. We will pair you up one-on-one with a mentor and mentor you all the way through 2021. If you're a student, 90% of our students graduate with a job coming out of the mentoring program. But this year we're also extending it to early career scientists, and it is in every state and territory. So we'd love to hear from you. All you have to do is contact me at mentoring@raci.org.au. The recording of this event will be uploaded to the RACI Career Development YouTube channel over the next few days, as well as our careers site, which is both raci.org.au careers and dcstechnical.com.au careers. In the meantime, all of our thanks to our presenters tonight, Vanessa Robertson, Patricia Rushton and Keely Munro, and to our sponsors, Envirolab, Laboratory Credit Union and DCS Technical. Thank you everybody for your time and participation tonight. It's been great.
Thank you.